Welcome to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. This podcast is for you if you lead people, teams, or the organisation. You might be a leader or a manager yourself, or you might be part of the support team to help those people to be really successful. I'm Anwen. I'm the leadership success coach and founder of Purple Sky Consulting, and I'm going to be the host for this podcast. My mission is to help as many leaders as possible to really love what they do. I want to help you to feel more confident, more capable, more effective, so that you can build and grow happy, healthy, more successful teams. This podcast is going to be all about helping you to love leading. Let's get started. Welcome to this next episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. I'm really delighted to be joined by Tom Emery from Hex Development today. And we're doing a bit of a special episode. We're going to be focusing specifically on HR leadership roles and HR leadership careers. Tom's created a framework around how CHROs can develop and how to go about developing themselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're also going to have a broader conversation around the role of the CHRO, CPO, what it means to be a leader in HR within the business and being part of the business, rather than separate too. So we've probably thrown in a few spicy kind of views on some of these topics as well. So I'd really love to hear what you think. Feel free to drop your responses and your thoughts in the comments for this episode as well. Just a quick interruption before we get started with Tom. If you're watching this on YouTube, about 20 minutes in, I had a bit of a technical fail. So you will see that the scene changes, the clothes, the hair, everything changes. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully it doesn't interfere too much with your viewing experience. But I am sorry about that. Hi, Tom. It's really lovely to have you with us on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Hiya, it's really good to be here. Delighted to see you as always.
Yeah, lovely. I've been on Tom's podcast, which we'll give a shout out to at the end as well. And always lovely having conversations with you and been getting to know you over the last couple of years now, probably, isn't it?
Probably.
We're probably tipping into that. How about you do a quick intro for our audience in terms of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Tom Emery. I label myself as a people performance consultant. So I'm a coach, both of individuals and teams. I do lots of leadership development. I do a bit of inclusion work, and I also do some broader HR consultancy. So my background is in human resources, over 20 years in human resources across lots of different industries. Most of the time, 13 years was in financial services. So I worked for a big multinational bank for several years doing lots of different roles. And then I was chief people officer at a wealth management firm in the city, and then a few years ago I set up Hex, which is my business, and we do all those things that I just mentioned.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We're very lucky to have a common contact, or you put us in contact with. So Emma did a previous episode for us as well on the podcast, and that's very much worth a listen if people haven't heard that yet. So go back and find
Yes, Emma's also been on our podcast. She's an old mucker of mine from HSBC days.
Yeah,
really
she's
fantastic
wonderful.
person.
Like the joy she can bring into a conversation is fantastic. So very much worth having a listen to that. So
Definitely.
As you know, I love a bit of travel, and on this podcast we like to ask our guests a little bit about their travel experiences. So what would you recommend or highlight for you for travel?
So I would say I am a bit of a lazy traveller. So I'm not an expeditioner like you.
I'm not sure if I was I can't even say that. I'm going to shut up.
Expeditioner, not an exhibitionist. Expeditioner. Yeah. So I tend to go on holiday for the purpose of, sitting on my backside and reading a book rather than climbing mountains and things like that. So I think probably, I was a big clubber when I was younger, so I have been to Ibiza probably every year since the late 1990s.
Excellent.
I think this year we might not go this year because we just got a puppy and it's all a bit difficult to get away. But Ibiza is one of my favourite places, even if you're not into clubbing, because it's got a lot going for it. Even if because I'm getting old now and I don't really enjoy the clubbing so much. I went to Sicily last year, and I think that Italy is a little bit untapped for me. I really enjoy it whenever I go. So I've been to Milan, Florence, Venice, Sorrento, and then I went to Sicily, and Sicily I just thought was absolutely stunning. So if you haven't been to Sicily, I would definitely recommend it.
So the only time I've been to Italy was when I was 15. I was doing Italian GCSE. I can hardly remember any of it now. But we had a foreign exchange. So we were up in Tuscany, and it was just such a beautiful part of the world. So Italy is definitely somewhere I want to be getting back to in terms of Ibiza. And maybe because I've never really been a big clubber or anything like that, maybe that's why I've always not considered going there. I don't know whether that's reputation had an impact on me.
Yeah, like I say, it's definitely not just for clubbing, and it's gone every year. It gets more expensive. They're trying to go up market. They're trying to, I think, reduce the amount of rowdy sort of behaviour. So there's some great hotels, great restaurants, and fantastic beaches and all that sort of stuff. So I'd recommend it.
Lovely. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what we also like to do is delve into individuals, guests' leadership experience for themselves as well, because obviously we're talking to leaders as part of this podcast, and we all have our own experiences of leading. I think every experience is unique, even though we can look at themes and ideas that are very similar. And, this episode is focusing particularly on HR leadership. So and I know that's our background, that's our environment that we've worked in. So it'd be really great to hear a little bit about your leadership experience and what did you learn about yourself from that?
I think it's an interesting question, because when I look back about my first leadership role, so I started in HR because I worked at Sainsbury's and didn't like stacking shelves, and went and managed to get a job in what was called personnel at the time, which sort of date stamps it a little bit. At Sainsbury's, quite quickly, when I left university there, because I was at university when I started working there. When I graduated, I became a personnel manager in training, and I had line management responsibilities straight away. So at the age of in my early 20s, basically managing people who were older than me, more experienced than me, and I think that was quite a challenge. And I think I probably learned quite a lot from that process. I then had the opportunity to lead in local government. I was at Manchester City Council for a few years, had quite a large team there actually. And again, that was, a bit of a baptism of fire really in terms of leadership, particularly in local government, very heavily unionised, very process focused, and people, give, I think, the public sector in some areas a bit of a bad rap, and those were hard jobs, people working very, very hard, some very, very committed people there. And having the sort of trade union element to it, I quite enjoyed. I enjoyed working with unions, but it certainly gave it a dynamic. It gave a different way of doing things. So definitely learned a lot there. And I think it was only when I was at HSBC that I really learned about the resilience that you need to have as a leader, and the discomfort that leadership can bring. So, one of the jobs I had at HSBC was looking after HR operations for the UK. So I had a big team, 75 people, matrix management for teams in India and the Philippines, and very, very complex actually in terms of a leadership, big leadership role. And one of the first things that I needed to do was to exit someone who wasn't performing, quite a difficult character, and that was tough. It was really tough to have to go through that. I sort of consider myself a nice person, and even if the person isn't doing a great job, then putting somebody out of work is not a nice thing to have to do. And I'd supported plenty of leaders to do it themselves, but I'd never had the responsibility of it being somebody on my team. And then I think going into being a chief people officer, that was much more of an enterprise leadership role, and that's something that I talk about a lot in my work with CHROs. How do you steer yourself more broadly than just the people person, and how do you actually understand your operation, your business, and support other leaders, and also taking that enterprise leadership role as somebody who's there to really support the effectiveness of the Exco team. I suppose, what did I learn about myself through that? Well, I learned that I'm quite sensitive. I get caught up in the emotions of things like everybody else. Enjoyed supporting others to be more effective. That's probably where my team coaching and individual coaching came from. But the other thing I suppose is that I'm always learning, and the leadership, your learning is never done. You're always going to keep meeting new characters, new situations, new contexts, new businesses, whatever. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, really lovely, and really lovely insight, I think, that around the getting to grips with the fact that it's never done. And it's never I've done leadership development and I'm over it kind of thing. Yeah. Because you never,
It's so true when you're leading a team, and especially in a HR environment. I think like no day is the same. Like no day is the same, and you're dealing with lots of different issues there. And I really loved you sharing that example of kind of shifting into needing to do the doing as much as the supporting others doing the doing. And I think it's really important that HR teams reflect on the needs to enable their own people leaders
Yeah.
to do that really well. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a view of, well, we're HR. We help the business do this stuff, so we don't need time to think about how we do this for ourselves. But actually, it was the most important transformative part of my leadership experience, was having leadership develop my own leadership development of me, because that gave me the space to really think about, what does this mean for me, and what are the things I need to do differently as a people leader now, rather than a HR person in a leadership role, if you see what I mean.
Well, sometimes I think that HR people are much better at dishing out advice than taking their own advice, if you see what I mean. So I've seen some pretty awful leadership from HR leaders, to be honest, and I've been on the end of it as someone on an HR team. I think, we sort of might get onto this later on, but one of the characteristics I think I see a lot in senior HR people is they neglect their own development through a combination of guilt that, they look after the development budget, so they don't feel like they should spend it on themselves or their team, or, they think that they're expert and don't need it. And, I think HR people need to focus much more on their own development. It's an important role in the organisation. It's important to get it right.
Yeah, I think and I don't want to put this as a burden on HR people, but there is a little bit of, if we're saying we're the subject matter experts in this area, we're then not role modelling what really great leadership looks like. A bit of a problem, really. And I'm not sure there's enough emphasis put on shifting from the ego of, well, we know this stuff, therefore we can do it, to actually what leadership development is. And it is about connecting individually with the requirements of that leadership role. And I don't think you can do that just because you've helped leaders to manage situations before. I think your focus here on this work is so important, because it is about kind of really thinking about the role of HR as leaders in the organisation. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this conversation. How about if we start looking at that role of the Chief HR Officer or CPO, depending on what language you use in your worlds. What do you see the opportunities are for organisations with that role, and where are you seeing the current placement or value put on that role at the moment? What are you seeing from that perspective?
Well, so let's sort of take a bit of a cliched phrase, but it's true, which is, the most expensive asset that an organisation generally has is its people. And often the first thing to go when times are tough is the development of the people. It's a cost, a P&L cost. It's easy to pull back on it. It's easy to just scale it back. And often it's in the tough times that it needs to actually scale up. So I don't really want to get into debates about, should HR be sitting on the board? Should it be ExCo? Should it not be? I've got a view on that, and that is, I think it should have a place at the top table. But I think the people in the role have to sometimes change to make that top table place deserved. And what I've already talked about in being the enterprise leader is really important. I think if we can be true enterprise leaders and we really do understand the operations and the strategy and the markets that our businesses are operating in, then I think it's a role that can really add some real serious value actually to the organisation. I mean, I reflect on my performance as a CHRO when I was doing it, and I look back and I think there were quite a few things that were lacking for me. I don't think I was the enterprise leader consistently. I think sometimes I would sit in the ExCo meetings, and ExCo meetings used to be quite long. I would sort of sit daydreaming or thinking about other things that I'd got to get done until, people agenda time, right, I'm up, I'll get up and I'll perform, and and I'll talk about the people. But I think there's much more an opportunity for us to really create that linkage, connection between what's going on in the market, what's going on in the operation, and what's going on with the people, and provide fantastic frameworks that are really enabling, have really challenging conversations, help leaders get through some of the real discomfort of what it's like to lead and what it's like to make difficult decisions, and really, be that a real expert, not just in, how to run an employee relations policy, but actually, how you really can, be an expert in connection and an expert in influencing, an expert in coaching, and an expert in driving forward the development of senior leaders, because that's where the magic's going to happen, I think, for the business.
I think you're so right in terms of that importance of being a business leader, really being part of the executive in a way that is impactful beyond the people agenda. And, we've almost created our own silo, I think, in HR of protecting the people space so much. And therefore, we've then got lost in the people space a little bit. Whereas actually, it's about the business. And the less we're talking about the business, the more maybe the exco are closing their ears because of it feels like the fluffy stuff. And actually, if we're talking more of the business stuff and that linkage to people, people want us at the table. So I'm a bit hard line on this, but I think we've created our own problem quite a lot.
No, I agree.
Leadership space.
Yeah, I agree, Anwen. A couple of things. So if you listen to the language that you use, actually, you use the language of HR and the business, right? Which I do all the time. I ran a webinar before Christmas, and I had a chief people officer on there from a tech company up in Manchester, probably not far from you. And she said that she'd had a conversation with one of her board members, one of her non-exec directors, and they'd said to her, "Do you not fancy moving into the business at some point?" And she was like, "What are you talking about? I am the business," right? And so, just the way we talk about them, being separate things. The other thing I think, and this I think might be quite unpopular with HR people, is that I think we allow ourselves as HR people to be put into the role that we sort of want to have. I think it sort of links to the point that you were making. So I see a lot of things on LinkedIn with people holding up whiteboards saying HR is really hard. Everyone piles in, yeah, it's so hard. We've got to take on everyone's emotional labor. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And, you get thousands of likes for these things, all from other HR people. Like, well, I just think, how is that going to change anything if you just put it on LinkedIn and listening to your echo chamber go, yeah, I agree with it. So my argument is always, if you want things to change, you have to change first, because that's how things change. People change and other people respond to that. So if you can set out, be much more purposeful, and that's a big part of the model that I use with CHROs, if you can be more purposeful about who you are, what you're there for, and where you spend your time, and don't give in to your people-pleasing tendencies, which I think quite a few HR people have, me included, by the way. Lean into the discomfort of actually saying, that is not my role, that is your role. And by all means, I'll tell you what I think about how you do that, and I'll support you, I'll coach you. But that is your job. I'm not taking on that emotional labor of that relationship with your team member. That's yours. That's your job. And so, I think, like I say, it's uncomfortable. It might be unpopular. But, this isn't just, this is a human trait. But there is a bit of this learned helplessness about everything is going on around us and we've got no agency to do anything about it. I think we have.
And, we're doing it to ourselves. That's the reality of it. And I think you're right. I think for some people, this will feel maybe a bit uncomfortable to look at it and go, well, if they're treating it that way.
Yeah.
You're allowing them to. So how do we raise the bar? And the only way we're going to raise the bar in HR is by raising that bar for ourselves and showing that actually the way we have real impact is by helping you to do your job really well and helping the business to grow in a way that's really useful. Yeah. So we've probably touched on some themes that we're kind of going to move into, which is where do you see the key challenges for the Chief HR Officer?
Well, just to contradict what I've just said, I think it's a hard role. I do think it's hard. Yes. I don't think it's any harder than any other role, by the way, but I do think it's hard. I think it's complex, it's tough. I think lots of HR people become the ultimate plate spinners, keeping a lot of things going, particularly if you're in a senior role and you've got, lots of different conflicting stakeholders. So, I always talk about, you might have your CEO you might report into, you might have the CFO who's got really sort of concerns about how much you want to invest and all that sort of stuff in your people agenda. You've got the rest of your exco, you've got the board, you've got a Remco chair that might have some quite different ideas about exec pay than the executives themselves, and lots of yeah, exactly. Lots of very sort of complex relationships, stakeholders, different priorities. Often the priorities conflict with each other. So I think that is a big challenge. I think people don't necessarily have a consistent view of really what the people team, HR team is there to do, and how it can enable and how it can be, you know, a real force for good in the organization. So I've been involved in the past in setting up people functions or HR functions, and you know, people have said things like, oh, I'm so glad you're here because, you know, you can have that meeting. I can send that person to you when they're complaining at me about something. Or I get somebody, you know, an employee saying, oh, it's great we've got an HR function now because we've got someone to go and moan about our line manager to, or whatever. You know, I'm sort of paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
But there's a constant need for us to keep reinventing and keep helping people to understand what we are there for, what we can do, and also what we're not going to do, you know, and creating those. Yeah, we could talk obviously about things like, oh, how is AI changing HR? You know, but AI is changing everything, and I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. Obviously, there will be unintended consequences, but I think, you know, let's lean into that. The economy's struggling. You know, what does that mean for HR leaders in terms of like how they support the business to get the right people in? You know, attract the right talent, make sure that they're cost effective and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, there are loads of challenges, I suppose. Some are the challenges we've always had, some are new, but I think it's the way that we deal with that is being quite reflective, being quite thoughtful about, okay, well, what is my purpose and what do I do as an HR leader to respond to some of those challenges both and act proactively as well.
Let's now move on to this next question, which is around being a brilliant CHRO, CPO. What's the impact of actually really nailing that role?
Well, I think obviously for the individual HR leader, there's a big sense of personal fulfillment. We all want to be great at our jobs. We all want to feel like we're adding value to the organizations that we work for, and, you know, that we're just doing well and, you know, smashing it in life. So it's important for the individual that we're impactful. I think, you know, I observe a lot of senior HR leaders that feel like they're sort of walking through mud and they're not getting everything done that they need to get done and having the impact that they can have. So I think, yeah, there's an individual thing. And obviously the more motivated we are by the work we do, the more impactful we'll be, and the more impactful we are, the more motivated we are, and there's a bit of a virtuous cycle, I suppose, to that. I think for organizations, we do always, you know, talk about people, assets, costs, and, you know, everything that we do has a people impact to it. And that means that a senior HR leader can really impact every part of the organization, whether it's, you know, strategic, whether it's more operational, whether it's around client and customer, whether it's around other stakeholders, then, you know, there's a real impact to everything. So I think if we can be in the right conversations, if we can have that credibility, respect, we can be that really great enterprise leader that our colleagues come to for guidance, for advice, for enablement, for support, and all those great things, then we've just got like the impact there, the potential is, you know, is infinite, really, isn't it? I don't know. What do you think?
And I think, you know, what I'm hearing you describe there is a leadership role, isn't it? You know, how you have impact for your function, but also, do you know what I think about my career in HR and the importance of really great HR leaders being an inspiration as well.
Yeah.
For the HR function, you know, in terms of not just driving the attitude and the culture and the environment within the team, but actually, oh, do I want to progress in HR in a leadership role? And I've seen many an HR colleague kind of go, I don't really want to go and do that job because that looks a bit hard, or it doesn't look interesting and inspiring enough. But when you're seeing great CPOs, great CHROs, that is inspiring as to what those careers actually can be for people.
Yeah, and you know, we're going to get on, I think, to the impact framework that I've developed for CHROs. But, you know, one of the parts of that is being that trusted partner, and for me, that was when I felt like that trusted partner. That's where I felt I was the most impactful. So, you know, I've had some really great people to partner in the business through my career. But, you know, there was my first boss at Brooks Macdonald, Caroline Connellan, who, you know, just an absolutely awesome leader, somebody who, you know, I always felt she really trusted me. And she would always come and talk to me about what was going on for her, like what she was thinking about when she was making not just a decision about people, but actually making more operational or strategic decisions. We would have that conversation. And that's just such a great feeling when you feel that trust. And, you know, we are firm friends out of that. And we've been in the trenches so much together. I think, and you know, we really sort of trust each other, and therefore that's meant that we've carried on being friends. And she's probably one of my best introducers to prospective clients. She's constantly recommending me, and you know, that's a special thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's relationships, isn't it? And that's what leadership is all about. So let's dive into that framework that you've created a little bit more. Tell us about it.
So the framework is something that I developed working with HR leaders. So whilst I coach and develop, you know, leaders from a really broad range of sectors and roles, I suppose I've developed a bit of a niche, if you like, in supporting HR leaders over the past couple of years. And I was finding that they had lots of, you know, similar problems or similar challenges in common. And I also reflected back on my experience as when I took on my first CHRO role. So I went into a wealth management firm. I had that brilliant boss, Caroline, that I've spoken to. But we were both in our first, she was in her first CEO role. I was in my first CHRO role. And I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, if I'm honest. You know, really had such a steep learning curve and felt quite lonely and felt quite, you know, anxious and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the task that I had. And so that's where the framework started to come from, because I started to think, well, what would have helped me at the time? You know, what would have helped me to understand, like, what were the important things for me to work through and for me to think about and for me to think about my behavior. And that's where the framework came from, and I decided as I built the framework that I would write a book to you know, to bring it to life and hopefully reach as many people as I possibly could. So the framework is based on so it has two axes. It has a vertical axis, which is at the top it's like what you do, and at the bottom it's relationships, basically how you do it. And then it's got a horizontal axis as well, which is on the left-hand side. It's what's going on outside the team and in the business and in the marketplace. And on the right-hand side, it's got what's going on in the team. And then around those two axes, you've got 4 skills. So the 4 skills are to be a commercial explorer, an expert in field, a leader of HR, and a culture and performance catalyst. And then overlapping each pair of those skills are 4 personas, which are enterprise leader, trusted partner, and HR talent enabler and business talent enabler. And the idea, I suppose, is that you can work through each area of the framework to build your skills, your capability, and to push into changing some behaviours. And that's what I do with my coaching clients.
Fantastic. When I'm hearing you talking about that framework, I'm hearing business leadership all the way through that. And that's what's so important about the conversation we've had already, but also where the positioning of CHROs needs to be is very much in that leadership piece. Yeah. This isn't just about a functional head. This is about leadership of the business.
Yeah, and that is the whole thing about enterprise leadership. It's about thinking, I'm not just there to turn up to Exco, sit half asleep or thinking about something else I should be doing until it's the people agenda bit. When I come to life, do my presentation, you know, present my paper or whatever, and then fall asleep again, or, you know, retreat into the shadows. So HR people can be that true enterprise leader, and that builds credibility, and that's linked to one of the 4 skills, which is commercial explorer, which is that's about being like, am I really interested in the operation of this organization that I work for? Do I understand if it's a profit-making company? Do I understand how it makes its money? Do I understand what its biggest costs are and what levers it can pull to be more successful? You know, or am I just like here because HR is the same in every organization? Because it's not. Obviously, there are some similarities, but if you want to be that true enterprise leader, you've got to be you've got to be really interested in what the business is doing.
I find that so frustrating sometimes when there's a lack of commercial thought when it comes to the people agenda. It's such an interesting way of looking at your role, and it's such an interesting part of the opportunity I think HR actually has, because in a way, we're the department that's able to get into all those areas, and we've got really great access to the relationships across the business. So when we aren't taking advantage of that, it's a little bit of it's a shame, isn't it? Because actually it's really interesting if you want to know your business and you can know your business well.
Yeah, one of the things, the real core thing about the framework as well is that in the center of it, it has a core mindset, which is for me, it's I've called it being purposeful and always learning. So you're always learning because you've got to role model that learning for the rest of your organization. But being purposeful is really understanding what you're there for. And I think often in organizations, and this comes up regularly with the HR leaders that I talk to, the HR leader has to be really clear what they're there for and what they're not there for, and to set those boundaries in the right way. And it links back to what we were saying before about, like always moaning about, loads of things coming at you. You've got to be able to say, like, that's not me. That's not for me. That is something else. And, that means that you often have to, you have to educate others on your purpose.
How do you think we can think about developing HR people? So, your framework is looking at that CHRO level.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts in terms of the transition into that space?
So the bad thing about HR, if you're trying to build a framework, is that the roles of CHRO, CPO, HR director, head of people and culture, whatever, sometimes these roles are interchangeable. So it's very difficult for me to have come up with the right title that was, sort of encompassing everybody. So I don't want you to think that anybody to think this is just about being a CHRO. It's about being a really great senior leader. So you might be head of HR in an entity of a larger business, or you might be a senior HR business partner with aspirations to move into a bigger job or the top job. All this sort of stuff is going to be generally pretty relevant to an extent. One of the things that I talk about in that sort of always learning side of things, and being an expert in field, and being a leader of HR, is that I think because HR leaders often hold the budget for learning and development, they're reluctant to spend it on themselves and their own team. There's like an element of guilt out there. And I know I felt that as well. And I remember going to my boss and saying, can I have some coaching? And I almost was really apologetic about it. And then she said, yeah, of course you can have some coaching. I mean, you're as important as anybody else in this organization. You've got to be well developed. You've got to be effective. So yeah, you can have your coaching. And we've got to be able to ask for what we need, and not be ashamed of that. We're important people in the business, and we've got to be well developed and skilled and capable. Absolutely.
So that's a bit about the framework. So the framework is the core part of the book.
Yeah.
Can we, for those of you on YouTube, can we see the book?
Yes, we can have the big reveal, because the copies arrived to me yesterday. So here it is. Can't believe that I'm actually, this is the premiere time I'm showing this to anyone.
I'm so excited.
Very lucky. Yeah, so the book is called People, Reach Your Full Potential as a Chief HR Officer. The way I've written the book is, and it was inspired by my business coach, a guy called Robin Waite, who I encourage people to, any entrepreneurs listening, I encourage you to check out Robin Waite. He's a great coach, and has really done wonders for my confidence as a business owner. So he wrote a book called Take Your Shot, which is about a golf pro who wants to basically improve his price and improve his business. And this guy starts coaching this guy to play golf, and this guy basically coaches him back and talks to him about some of the changes that he can make. So I sort of was inspired by Robin, and Robin actually helped me come up. Well, I say he helped me come up with the title. He came up with the title, and I'm really ashamed to say I forgot to put him in the acknowledgement, so I'm going to have to really apologise to him.
Well, you're doing it now.
Yeah,
we'll send him this.
I realised when I was reading the acknowledgements last night when I got the books, and I thought, oh, crikey, I've forgotten.
Maybe you'll have to pencil it in on the one you sent him.
Yeah, grovel in. Anyway, so I thought, right, I'll follow the same sort of structure, I'll write a work of fiction. So I'm going to write about a character, a CHRO in a financial services business who is struggling. They're overwhelmed, they're tired, they're anxious, all those things that I said before. So that obviously there's a bit of me in this character.
Yeah, of course.
And there's a bit of other HR leaders that I've worked with. And she's called Joanna. She goes to some coaching with a coach who helps her go through the CHRO impact framework. And she tries new behaviors and she tries new things and she builds better boundaries and she sees the transformation it can make. And without too many spoilers, there's like a happy ending because she ends up with let's just say like a new, even more exciting role at the end of it.
Excellent. I love that. Love that.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you. I think it's so brave doing stuff like writing books and things like that. It's really, really incredible, and feel delighted that we've got the premiere of the book arriving.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's really kind of you to say. And Anwen, because we've spoken about this on several occasions. If you want to be successful in this game, you've got to put yourself out there. And you've got, my friend Amy Bateman, who we had on the Beyond Potential podcast, she talks about like, you've got to make some noise if you want to be successful. And sometimes making noise is really, really daunting and terrifying. So you just got to get on and do it, which is I suppose what I'm trying to do. I think it's incredible. And by the way, that shout out to the Amy episodes on your podcast, we'll put a link to it because I thought it was really, really wonderful episode. Awesome. Yeah.
She's absolutely awesome.
And she's got a podcast called Female Further. So she specializes in coaching female entrepreneurs, really. But it's a really good podcast, actually. I listen to it even though I'm not a female. But I get a lot from it,
Okay, well, I've not found a podcast, so I will find the podcast as well, and we'll make sure that that's linked in here for this episode as well. So really exciting. When's the book out then? So we've got it landed, but when is it out? So
it's out on the 11th of March. If people go to my website and register their interest, then we will have like a special deal coming out, and people will be able to get the book at a negligible cost. So, so please go to my website and hopefully you can link to that somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. We will be able to do that because this episode will be going out just before the book launches. So hopefully brilliant. That means we'll be able to get a bit of support for you from that perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so book out. If you're developing as a chief HR officer, this framework is a great place for you to have a think about your development. Or even if you're thinking of wanting to go on that route, this again is a great place to start that stuff early, Start getting into that mindset as early as you can within your HR career, because that will really set you up for success and get you in a place where you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Any other top tips that you want to put across in terms of kind of the either the role of the CHRO or how people can think about their development and impact?
Whatever role you're in, whether you're in an HR role or whatever role, just spend some time reflecting. Reflecting is often quite uncomfortable, and people think, I've got to put an hour aside in my diary to do like some reflection exercise. You don't need to do that. You just literally need to spend 2 or 3 minutes, even if that's all you need to do. What's going well at the moment for me? Like, where am I finding energy and where am I sort of feeling good about things? And what do I think I can do better? And what can I therefore try? Like just that 2 or 3 minutes, if you just do that regularly, I guarantee you'll see some massive improvements. For HR leaders in particular, I just really encourage people as a starting point to think about that purpose. So who do you want to be as an HR leader? Like, what do you want to be known for? What are you trying to achieve? Do the things that you do align to that purpose? Or are you actually spending your time doing things that don't add value and don't actually contribute to where you want to be and who you want to be as an HR leader? And then the final thing, which again is a bit more just a general, I think, tactic for not only for business, for leadership, but for life, is just if it feels a bit uncomfortable, it's probably the right thing to do. And we don't ever look back on our lives and remember, our proudest achievements are never the things that were easy. Our proudest achievements, where we had growth, where we got real fulfillment, came out of things that were tough. So if you think you've got a book in you, but you're too scared to put it out there, put it out there. I don't think you'll regret it.
Oh no, I'm feeling the spotlight on that topic there.
Yeah.
I might have to come back to you. So I think the piece I'd add to that in terms of kind of leaning into that is get mentors. Surround yourself with people that help inspire you and provide you with support. Because I think your point around feeling quite lonely and isolated, I think in HR roles, we either do that to ourselves or we don't give ourselves the opportunity to go out there and find the support that we need. So
Yeah.
mentors are incredible. Find people that inspire you, and it doesn't have to be HR people, you know.
No, and you know, that's you know, that's just really important as well. Like if you want help off somebody, go and ask them, right?
Yep.
The worst that can happen is that they say no. And
Yeah.
anybody who wants to talk to me about framework, HR, leadership, life, my door's open. You know, just get in touch.
Lovely.
I love to meet new people and love to, you know, I'm a bit nosy. I like to find out a bit about people. So I'm always very happy to speak to anybody.
Perfect. And I thoroughly recommend you getting Tom in your life. So how about you share with us a little bit about where people can find you and get to know you a bit better?
Yeah, so I put quite a lot of content on LinkedIn about some of the stuff that I'm doing, some of the thinking that I have. Obviously, the Beyond Potential podcast, you can find me and my mucker, Tom Mason, there. We really enjoy doing that and have some fun and go and have a listen to Anwen's episode, which is excellent.
Yes, please.
And my website as well. You can contact me through that. I assume you can link to that somewhere in the show notes. Always really happy to hear from anybody. So yeah, get in touch.
Fantastic. Tom, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your ideas and your inspiration. And, you know, a personal thank you from me as well for all your kindness and support since we've been getting to know each other. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for everything that you do, Anwen, as well. I think you do some brilliant stuff. And I wish you all the luck in the world with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. You'll find all the resources and the links that we mentioned down in the show notes. If you love this episode, why not share it with somebody else in a leadership role who you think would find this useful? If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if we've earned it, why not leave us a 5-star review? I'm Anwen, your host, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast very soon. Bye for now.